Dustin Poirier confirms that he will be fighting Islam Makhachev for an upcoming title fight. And by the way, I don't think that he deserves it. And this is also a fight that Islam Makhachev doesn't need. For one, you have to understand Dustin Poirier is just coming off of a win off of Benoit Saint Denis. The possible and real deserving title contender of this fight is already busy, which is who? None other than Justin Gaethje, who's now busy fighting Max Holloway coming up this weekend. By the way, as you're watching this is literally the last day of fasting in Ramadan, which sort of symbolizes the fact that Islam Makhachev is now ready to go into a full training camp and set to face either one of these contenders, but more than likely it will probably be Dustin Poirier just based on the elimination alone. A lot of these different 155ers have either been busy, undeserving based on their rankings, or just the sheer fact that Dustin Poirier came off of a big win, and being a big name, I think sort of lends itself into, well, the idea that the UFC goes with the guys that has the most clout rather than the guys that are the most deserving. So with that in mind, let's break down some psychological and technical aspects of this fight. For one, you have to understand, Dustin Poirier has already fought Khabib Nurmagomedov, and as a result, a lot of people are going to look at this fight and think to themselves, well, you know what, perhaps maybe this is a fight that it seems we've already seen. Given the simple fact that a lot of people compare Islam Makhachev to Khabib Nurmagomedov almost as twins of some sort. But here's something that you have to understand. In the career trajectory of both these men, and I'm talking about Dustin Poirier and Islam Makhachev, Islam Makhachev has one loss in his record. Back in 2015 against Adriano Martins, was knocked out, but then came back ever since then with a 13-fight win streak, and 8 of them were basically finishes. And so as a result of that, he's improved since then. Dustin Poirier has lost to Justin Gaethje last year and the summer for the BMF belt, only for him to bounce back against Benoit Saint Denis in a very impressive performance, mind you. But at the same time, it kind of tells you that these two guys are their own men and they are their own matchup, exclusive away from the Khabib Nurmagomedov result, which happened back in 2019 in UFC 242 in Abu Dhabi with Dustin Poirier versus Khabib. And obviously, here's a couple of technical aspects that you can take. And I'm going to jump around from the technical to the mental breakdown. And I'm not going to decompartmentalize this into different parts because I know how people are when it comes to, let's say, their ADD or their lack of attention span. So here it goes. The psychological part is that Dustin Poirier is going to think in his mind that this is nothing like Khabib, and he wants to prove that. Meaning that he's going to go into this fight perhaps maybe underestimating Islam Makhachev, not considering the fact that perhaps maybe he's a better version of Khabib. But Islam Makhachev will also think to himself that perhaps maybe I have a much better outcome than Khabib based on the fact that he knows he's a better striker than Khabib. And I'm talking about Islam Makhachev being a better striker than Khabib. He also believes that he's a much more improved version of Khabib. So there's going to be an underestimation on the part of Islam Makhachev as well. With Dustin Poirier, you also have to understand the psychological parts of this. He already has a hot sauce company going on that, by the way, no pun intended, is red hot, really great with his business. On top of that, has made an insurmountable amount of money from the Conor McGregor fight. And on top of really just his daily income from the businesses and the commercials that he's involved in. So you have to think, is Dustin Poirier motivated for this fight? And here's the thing you have to understand. In the Western world, one of the biggest things that we are motivated by is consumerism, and not only that, capitalism. So as a result, here's something that you have to understand. As Muslims, we're a little bit different, okay? And I'm going to tell you why. Islam Makhachev already has all the money in the world. He's been having money dating back to when Khabib started getting money, because guess what? That's just the kind of family they are. When one guy makes the money, the other guy has all the money in the world as well, and that's just what it is. So he's always had a certain motivation of a killer instinct that is beyond the capitalistic drive that most people in the Western world have. So, in other words, Dustin Poirier may already be content with everything that he has, other than the fact that he wants the glory of a championship, because guess who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want that? Everybody wants that. But the bottom line is, you have to ask yourself, how bad do you want it when the fight starts to get hard? And this is where the technical aspect comes into play. We know that Dustin Poirier can be easily taken down, especially with a formidable wrestler. He himself can take guys down with a great wrestling prowess if, let's say, he was to take on somebody like Conor McGregor. When he took on Conor McGregor, he said that, you know what? This guy feels a whole lot lighter in terms of not giving the amount of resistance that he would have expected from the clinch positions, from the takedown positions, and perhaps maybe a lot of that lends itself to the reality that Conor McGregor is super content with the commercialized and the capitalistic successes that he's had in his career. So as a result, perhaps maybe you could say that that lended itself to the reality of your performance going into that ring. Sure, everybody wants to be a tough guy. Everybody wants to be the toughest guy in the world. But the problem is, when you already have everything that you want, are you really that guy? And let me steer off of the fight game for a little bit and talk about some people's personal lives. Most people, when they start living in the suburbs, all of a sudden, a lot of things start going away. Their sense of drive, their sense of killer instinct. Not only that, a lot of guys that made it and have already lived that American dream in a white picket fence suburb, all of a sudden become fat, all of a sudden become complacent. And as a result, they become a shell of themselves as the young, hungry lion that was poor and was living in an apartment rather than living in a nice neighborhood that they have already accomplished. And this is a reality for a lot of people. Let me tell you where this is not a reality for some people. Us Muslim guys, we have a warrior culture that I believe really lends itself not only to the business world, the corporate world, and any type of field of competition or any type of field of professionalism that I think is absolutely unmatched to the Western world, that is, quite frankly, motivated by consumerism, capitalism, in which this fight will be affected in that particular matter at hand. So guess what? Here's something that you have to understand about Dustin Poirier as well. First of all, he has one foot out the door and one out the other. He's taken a lot of damages all throughout his career. Sure, has Islam Makhachev taken some damages as well in terms of maybe the hard sparring sessions that the American Kickboxing Academy out here in San Jose is really known for? Absolutely. He's taken a few damages in that, but not in the way that Dustin Poirier has not only done it in a gym, but has also done it in the fights that we've seen with the likes of Justin Gaethje, Dan Hooker, and the list goes on and on with the different names and the wars that Dustin Poirier has lended himself into. Eddie Alvarez, also another name to throw in there. Just all these names and all these wars that he's experienced. At some point, he's going to break and he's going to get damaged. Now, obviously, he was very lucky to get past Benoit Saint-Denis. Even though Benoit Saint-Denis is a tough guy, French Special Forces, an upcoming 155er, it just wasn't enough because Dustin Poirier's experience lended itself to get him through that fight. But if you want to take on Islam Makhachev, you need more than just experience. You need more than just great attributes. You need a lifetime of work that really lends itself to a warrior lifestyle that doesn't deviate from, let's say, having after parties after your fights, or this aspect of, well, you know what, I'm just going to go take it easy today, or take it easy because I already have money in the bank. Guess what? Khabib has had money in the bank for a long time, even after the Conor McGregor fight. And he could have retired right there. What did he do? He went on and took on Dustin Poirier. And by the way, trained like a Spartan for that particular fight. And again, I'm not here to promote the Spartans in any way, because if you know anything about their particular history, it doesn't really lend itself to, let's say, the manly nature that we intend to have. Okay, let's just put it like that. I urge you to take a look at the Spartans if you know what I mean. But not to stir off, here's what it is. He trained like he was going to war. And as a result, the result spoke for itself. He won that fight. The Justin Gaethje fight did the same thing, a very dangerous fight. He made it look easy. Sure, did he struggle? Absolutely. Why would you not struggle when you are fighting the best guys in the world? But as a result, the sheer toughness and the preparation and the technicality that he's built over the years all accumulated into him being able to dominate that fight, but also survive the harsh realities of, let's say, the back and forth, and also the reality of that these guys are just top level guys and are going to get you at some moments. But overall, the result lended itself to the reality that these guys are unbreakable. And I'm talking about Khabib and Islam. Not only are they unbreakable, they have literally hours and hours upon training, to where a lot of these guys in the Western world sort of lended themselves into having a party lifestyle or some sort of little break, or you know what, let's just have a little bit of drinks here and there, or let's just do drink a little bit of whiskey after a fight and maybe do a little bit of some recreational drugs. There is none of that when it comes to these Muslim fighters. And this is something that you have to understand if you want to fight these guys and be at their level, but also even have a slight chance to take them on. So I don't see Dustin Poirier really having any chances in this fight, other than the fact that he will get a few guillotine attempts, based on the fact that when you shoot for a double leg takedown or a single leg takedown, those opportunities present itself, and it's going to be an opening that he's going to try and take advantage of, but will miserably fail. In the same way that he tried to slap on that guillotine against Khabib. He tried to slap it on Benoit Saint-Denis. How did that go? Obviously, he was able to escape it. Why? Because Benoit Saint-Denis was tough enough to get away from that, but also had enough technical prowess to be able to do that. But when you're dealing with somebody like Islam, it is more than just technical prowess or the attributes of having high proficiency in grappling. It is a lot more than that. Now you're taking on a guy who grew up in a mountainous area, by the way, which is the reason why they're able to push a certain level of pace that can't be matched, not even with the likes of Colby Covington, maybe with the likes of Colby Covington, depending on if he can fight somebody that is within that level, maybe somebody like Khamzat. But that type of environment, I think, is the reason why they are who they are, and why they are able to lend themselves into very devastating results against their opponents. So Dustin Poirier, I think, has a lot of thinking to do when it comes to training for this fight, and I think that is going to overload him. But also, you got to understand, he has new responsibilities that lend themselves into, let's say, this particular aspect of his new ventures of business, being a father, and things of that nature. I got to tell you, a lot of these Muslim guys, in these particular instances, they don't have the same issue or the same problem that, let's say, most of these other guys have when they have to do, let's say, 50-50 type of household chores when it comes to, let's say, getting their training done. Their families are all in, whereas maybe you could say with the Western fighters, it's not so much of a reality on their end. And I'm sorry if this may offend some people, but I'm only speaking the truth in terms of what it is that these guys can lend themselves to in terms of their career paths and what their lifestyles look like behind the scenes. You see, a lot of people are only looking at the aspect of what they see from the superficial side of what they see in the fights. Let's say Dustin Poirier looking good from the Benoit Saint-Denis fight. Well, is he going to do that against Islam? Whereas with Islam has a great striking prowess, a whole lot better than Khabib, to where he's not going to be able to knock him out in that particular instance, at least not easily. On top of the fact that he has an ever-evolving Muay Thai game that he displayed against Alexander Volkov. Knocked him out with a head kick, which, by the way, a lot of people did not expect. So what is it that Dustin Poirier is going to have to expect in this fight going in against Dustin Poirier? We don't know. We don't know what Islam Makhachev is working on. Well, I sort of know, but I can't tell the world. But put it like this. I don't think that Dustin Poirier is going to be doing the same amount of training or the same amount of preparation that Islam Makhachev has. And by the way, sorry to tell you, he's taken on basically the better version of Khabib whereas Islam Makhachev is in his prime of his life. Dustin Poirier is 35 years old at a 155 division, which, by the way, doesn't really give you any advantage in that particular weight class, in that age category. But then again, we also said that about Benoit Saint-Denis. What's the difference? Benoit Saint-Denis is not Islam Makhachev. And that's just the reality of it. So what else can we look at in this fight? I'm going to read to you an article that I read on, where is this article? This particular article on Islam Makhachev. Let me see here. Okay, so Matt Brown on MMAfighting.com, he argues for Dustin Poirier's title shot against Islam Makhachev. Anything he wants, he should get. So on paper, Dustin Poirier probably shouldn't be considered for a #1 title contender in the lightweight division. Logic. However, that might go out the door for the potential fight for Islam Makhachev. Why? Why is that going to go out the door? For the simple fact that, let's just be honest, Dustin Poirier is a big name. Now, ever since he flattened Benoit Saint-Denis at UFC 299, the one-time interim lightweight champion shifted gears to push for a fight against Islam Makhachev, who currently doesn't have an opponent set to date for his return. Obviously, Justin Gaethje in UFC 300 is taking on Max Holloway. The man who knocked out Poirier last July faces Max Holloway, while the former champion, the guy that Islam Makhachev beat, Charles Oliveira, is taking on Arman Tsarukyan. Now, we could argue Arman Tsarukyan deserves a title shot because guess what? He came into the UFC fighting Islam Makhachev, fighting basically the hardest fight of his life, the hardest fight in the division in his debut. And yet here he is still winning and still on a streak with the UFC after his first debut loss. And so the winners of either of those fights could argue for a title shot. But the UFC welterweight Matt Brown says the Louisiana native has built up enough goodwill and resume plastered with enough legendary performances that no one will really complain if he faced with Islam Makhachev. So in other words, what Matt Brown is trying to say is that I don't think his resume really matters or his legendary status. It really is about the competitive architecture that is in front of you. He doesn't deserve it, but it's his way of coping with the idea that he should get the fight. And quite frankly, Islam should take it because it's a big money fight for him. And Dustin Poirier is a big name. And I would argue probably even bigger than Justin Gaethje at this point, even if he had defeated him. So, also, Matt Brown goes on to say that why not? Give him a shot. Brown said on The Fighter versus the Writer, that's all I've got to say about it. Why not? Let's go. Dustin deserves anything he wants and he should get it. Obviously, a bit of an emotional fallacy on the part of Matt Brown, not really talking with logic, but guess what? Emotional fallacies in the fight game really does help in terms of promoting you, but not only that, also getting you title shots that you don't deserve. And he also says, deserving or not, Poirier also has time on his side. What does he mean by that? With the two key lightweight matchups at UFC 300, which is going on this week. By the way, this is the last day of Ramadan, as you know, which, by the way, Islam is going to be in full speed of a training camp as a result. And seemingly unlikely, anybody from that card will be unable to return as early as June 1st. So, by the way, 302 or 303 is a possible dates for these particular fights with Islam Makhachev and Dustin Poirier. And they don't have a clear main event for these particular cards yet. They have 301 set for UFC Rio. Obviously, 300 is going on this week. After that, there really is no clear main event in these cards. And by the way, Islam could easily slide in there and fill that in. Makhachev has also expressed interest in the fight, which, by the way, this is the reason why I feel that this fight is really signed, sealed, and delivered, even though there is no official word, because all you need is Islam Makhachev to agree, Dustin Poirier to agree, and they both like it. Dustin Poirier wants the opportunity. Islam Makhachev wants the clout of beating a big name. Also expressed interest in his fight, so it seems that the matchmakers have an easy job when determining the next person to get a title shot, on top of the fact that these cards are not filled yet. Poirier hasn't rattled off numerous wins in a row and is not sitting at an absolute top of the division. And Brown believes none of that really matters. Well, Matt Brown, it does matter, but if you're talking about what matters in terms of business, why not? You can't complain anytime Dustin Poirier gets a title shot. Of course not. That is if you're a casual fan. He deserves anything to give him, anything good, any title shot, just give it to him. It's effing Dustin Poirier. Again, more emotional fallacy from Matt Brown, but nonetheless, emotional fallacies is what gets us big title fights and money-making cards at that. Has he ever put on a bad fight? No. Again, emotional fallacy. Has he been right? Yes. Emotional fallacy. If you want to call that a bad fight, call that a bad fight, but he goes out there and goes to war every time and does his thing. By the way, same as Matt Brown, he likes that because he fights the same way, but guess what? This is also going to leave you vulnerable against a very technically sound Islam Makhachev. He goes on to say he does his thing, does it with respect and honor, carries himself well, speaks well, just an effing great guy. Again, more emotional fallacy by the CTE-ridden Matt Brown. And even if Poirier isn't technically the top contender at 155, he remains one of the biggest draws in the sport. Once again, I agree with Matt Brown on that. That is exactly why he should get this fight, on top of the fact that everybody is busy. That could help Makhachev decide, and the champ also seek to define his legacy as a dominant title holder in arguably UFC's deepest division. Couldn't agree more with Matt Brown. Beating Poirier not only adds him to an A-list names of Makhachev's resume, it potentially sets him up for a run of title defenses. Absolutely. There's some killers in that division, Brown said. Islam's got his work cut out for him. Very true. Islam is a killer. I would pick him to lose against anybody, but a murderer's row like this, he gets through those guys no matter how this plays out. He gets 4 out of 5 title defenses, and what an effing run. I agree with Matt Brown on that. By the way, sorry if I'm saying that you have CTE and all that. I'm just saying that that's a possibility considering how you fight and the style that you lend yourself to. That is a possibility, just like Dustin Poirier, which is why he has all these emotional fallacies in sort of supporting him as this exciting fighter. But nonetheless, those types of exciting fights is what makes the money. As much as popularity and hype shouldn't necessarily determine who gets a title shot, Brown goes on to say, by the way, Matt Brown, to respond to that, it does in a way, and this is why you're saying this, because you're right, and I'm right about this too, and we agree on that. But almost every athlete on the roster knows differently. To add to that, Poirier just stomped the highly touted prospect in Saint-Denis, and he certainly seems ready for Makhachev. I want to see nothing but good things in the world for Dustin Poirier and for the rest of his life. Matt Brown said, give him the effing title shot. Let's go. Let's go. All right, so Matt Brown, you're 100% right about a lot of things. And I like the fact that he was very objective in basically explaining that not only does he not deserve it, but he deserves it at the same time. And this is literally why I'm explaining this to you in this type of particular matter. So that is what we have going on for Dustin Poirier and Islam Makhachev. And I hope you guys like this content. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And I will see you guys in the next content to come, inshallah.